Washington is trending up in the hunt for one of the nation's elite offensive tackles.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network, and this episode is brought to you by Mazda. Like our players, we're driven by the details. Highlights make the reel, but the work behind them makes it count. Stay tuned for this week's Moving the Game Forward, the all-new Mazda CX-5, more to move every side of you. And as we wrap up this week on Friday, I wanted to spend some time diving in a little bit to both the men's and women's basketball programs, kind of a transfer portal update and situation, how I think the roster might play out for next year. Moving forward on the women's side of things, there's some speculation that Tina Langley, who's from the state of Alabama, might be considering the open position down there. I don't necessarily believe that, but that's a conversation for later on, because the Huskies secured a commitment from 4-star defensive tackle Jon Ioane on Thursday, and with now 10 commits this early in the 2027 class, I wanted to really dive into this class and give some of my thoughts as to how it looks so far, what might be coming next, and just who might be underrated, because I think this class looks really good on the surface, but there's a lot to dive into. And speaking of looking really good, Washington, one thing from that interview that Blair Angulo, Tom Loy, and Andrew Ivins did with Jon Ioane, they spent some time after talking about what could be next for Washington in the 2027 class. And I really wanted to dive into that, because one of the first things they said that was kind of made me say, oh, all right, yeah, okay, this is where we are at this point in time, is Tom Loy was very quick to bring up that Washington is one of the top contenders now for 5-star offensive tackle Oluwasemilore Olubobola from St. Peter's Prep High School in New Jersey. And this is massive, because the Huskies were able to get him on campus for an unofficial visit for junior day, and he's already stated his intentions that he wants to come back for a spring practice. And this is one of those things where this is like a program-changing sort of move if you're able to get a commitment and a signature from a player of this caliber. And it's not going to be easy. By no means am I trying to sit here and tell you that Washington is the favorites, because I don't think that's the case at this point in time. And it'd be very hard to say that for a kid that has 42 offers from all over the country. Florida is one of the big teams in the mix. He was just down there on campus not too long ago. You look through this offer list: LSU, Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Texas A&M. There are so many big-time programs that are in the running for his services that I truly don't know if there is a leader at this point in time. But hearing that from obviously these big national recruiting analysts is something that should give you a little bit of hope. And also, to me, it's a very impressive just kind of benchmark of where Jedd Fisch and Michael Switzer are in terms of recruiting the offensive line in particular at this time, because you look at this particular player at 6'6", 283 pounds, ranked as number 20 player in the nation, number 4 offensive tackle. This is the kind of guy who, once again, if you can find a way to work yourself into the mix and get a commitment from him, I know, earth-shattering analysis is here. You've got to find a way to do that. And I think that Washington has done a great job of leaving an impact for him. And something I wrote about a little bit over on Huskies Wire. And it got me thinking, because this is the kind of guy where, just like they're doing it with Cody Green, you have to find a way to sell early playing time for a player like this. It's always a little uncomfortable talking about that with offensive linemen, especially for somebody who will it's seemingly enroll on a college campus at 17 years old. So he's going to be a little bit on the younger side, just like John Mills was, though. And that's kind of where I wanted to take this discussion, because when I look at the impact that John Mills made, I'm not saying by any means that that's what Oluwasemilore Olubobola would have wherever he winds up in college. But it's just one of those things where when I look at the 2027 roster and how that might play out, if Washington is indeed selling early playing time, which they almost 100% are, as they have been with all of these top recruits, I look at Olubobola specifically, and I was just kind of like, well, how would this work? Where would he fit if he does wind up at Washington? Because Drez Aparti is set to graduate after the 2026 season. And I was just curious, because John Mills was excellent in 2 games at right tackle as a true freshman. And I'm sure that, being a junior going into the 2027 season, you'd want to try him out at tackle. You'd want to get him to, display that ability, whether it be on the left side, but that looks like it would be Cody Green, or on the right side, and just let him do that and show off his NFL prospects, since obviously we know how Jedd Fisch feels about the 33rd NFL team and so on and so forth. So maybe he would take a similar path to John Mills and you'd want to try to start him off at guard and kick him out to tackle at some point eventually. I don't know. But that was just something that kind of was kicking around in my head because Washington has done such a good job of selling offensive linemen as a whole. You everydayers know this. I talked about this a little bit on yesterday's show because we look at where the Huskies stand in terms of Jacoba Doyle, Lincoln Maggio, pair of 4-star prospects, and then all these other high-end guys that they're in on, whether it be DeJon Yarbrough or Ben Lowther or Ty Kennedy or Reese Russell. The Huskies have done such a great job of selling offensive linemen that it feels like they're just never out of a race at this point when they really want to get just like really ramp up the pressure and get into the mix. And that's exactly what they've done here. And so I'm very curious to see how this is going to work out going forward because I'm told Washington is pushing very, very hard to set up an official visit with him. And according to what Tom Loy and Andrew Ivins were saying on their report, it does sound like the Huskies are going to be able to secure one. So that's a situation I'm going to be monitoring very closely. But another guy that they mentioned in their report was 4-star wide receiver Osani Gayles, who's currently ranked as the number 35 player in the nation and number 7 wide receiver by 247 Sports down at IMG Academy in Florida. And this is another guy. They mentioned him, Trey Moore, Oluwasemilore, a couple other guys in this blob of players that Washington is among the top choices right now. And with Trey Moore, we've talked about that one a lot. So I wanted to make sure I said his name, but I really wanted to focus on Osani Gayles here for a couple of minutes because this is just one of the most impressive players in the nation. Where don't look at his high school numbers because he plays in a run-heavy offense down at IMG, but in terms of the pacing that he has in his route running, the things that he's able to do both on the inside and the outside, this is the kind of player that no matter what your wide receiver room looks like in terms of the class, in terms of who you've already brought in, and so on and so forth, you have to go and get him. And I know this isn't earth-shattering news to anybody who follows recruiting very closely, but it's something that I don't feel like, we who have followed Washington football for a very long time have been really used to outside of the last couple of years of the Chris Peterson era. So as this continues to move on, I look at a guy like Osani Gayles, who the Huskies are, again, sounds like one of the top contenders for, and have done a really great job getting in the mix, where I look at this process, and it's certainly going to be difficult to beat out USC since he's originally from California, Alabama, Tennessee, some of those SEC powers who are a little bit closer to him since he is now in Florida. But it sounds like Washington and Kevin Cummings have gained a solid foothold here. And one of the biggest reasons for that is he does have some local ties. It sounds like his sister is a UW alum, so she obviously has spent a whole bunch of time up here and knows what kind of just place UW can be. It sounds like he's got some family that lives up here as well. So, and that's always something that does seem to resonate with a lot of these kids, no matter where they're from. And all you Pacific Northwesterners know this. Me as an LA transplant, it's a little bit different, but I think that's something that might hold some real weight here. And as this continues to move forward, I'm very curious to see if the Huskies are going to be able to set up an official visit with Osani, because it's going to be really difficult. Alabama is set for May 29th. USC is June 5th. Tennessee is June 12th. So the only logical date right now, unless the Huskies choose to host some guys in late April for a spring practice, or maybe for the spring game like they have done in past years, is June 19th, the final official visit weekend. And if the Huskies are able to schedule him for that date, not only would I feel even better about where the Huskies might stand, just like with Oluwasemilore at this time, I don't feel like the Huskies are in the lead. I just feel like they've done a very good job of getting into this race from everything that I've heard, from what I've seen. So that was just something I wanted to make sure I mentioned, because if you're able to get him up for that final official visit weekend, where Trey Moore will also be visiting, that's just one of those things where, as we continue to look at how Jedd Fisch and his coaching staff have been able to build this class out, that would be another big time step in the right direction for a class that is currently sitting inside the top 5 in the nation. So let's dive into what that means and what could be next. Right after a message from our good friends over at Mazda. This is Moving the Game Forward by Mazda. For those who know, the score never tells the whole story. And one person who I really wanted to talk about this week is sophomore guard Zoom Diallo, because we saw him take such a massive step forward this year, especially late in the season as the injuries really continue to pile up. Zoom was somebody who I think, as his career continues to develop under Danny Sprinkle, he is somebody who could be an all Big Ten caliber player and truly one of the best guards in the nation, with the physicality that he showed this season and just how impressive he was at scoring the ball. He had 3 double-doubles this season. I couldn't have been more impressed with the development that we saw from him from his freshman season to his sophomore year, and I'm so excited about what's next for him. There's more to these players than the highlights. The early mornings, late night runs, constantly showing up for their squad on and off the court. The all-new Mazda CX-5 moves the same way, with more space to connect, a bold new design, and more intuitive technology so you can stay connected to the road and every position you play. The all-new Mazda CX-5, more to move, every side of you. And we've got a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. The tournament is here, one of the best times of the year. Brackets, buzzer beaters, upsets. It's nonstop action from tip to final cutdown. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a way to stay in the action all tournament long. You get up to $300 back in bonus bets every day for 10 days. That means 10 chances to stay involved throughout the entire tournament. You can mix it up however you want. Game picks, futures, or even same game parlays for bigger potential payouts. It's perfect for the tournament because every day there's something new. Different matchups, new storylines, and more ways to get involved as the bracket unfolds. So visit FanDuel.com to sign up today. That's FanDuel.com to get in on the action. To all you everydayers out there, thank you once again for making Locked On Huskies your first watch or first listen of the day. And if you're interested in checking out our Everydayer Club, now is the time. You can get your first month free when you use code MARCH. You'll unlock ad-free episodes of the show and entry into our private listener group chat on Discord, where I'm going to be hanging out daily. You can ask me any questions you might have. You can click the link in the show notes or go to lockedonhuskies.supercast.com to claim your free month. So as we move on here, I wanted to take a deep dive into this class because I've seen a lot going around about, where the Huskies are sitting right now, which is obviously a really exciting thing to think about when you see that Washington is ranked as the number 5 team in the nation, according to 247 Sports' class rankings in 2027. I think it can be a little misleading right now because of how many commits Washington does have, but at the same time, I think it's a very good sign for where this class is continuing to go. And I'll get into that in a minute because I wanted to start with this. Of Washington's 10 pledges right now, 4 are blue chip commits. That's 4-star running back Jeremy Danju, 4-star wide receivers Zarek Sidney and Braylon Pope, and 4-star defensive tackle Jon Ioane, the newest addition to that list. I don't think that'll be it. Obviously, I think that some of these other guys in this class might also get that extra bump. So when I look at this and I see people saying, well, hey, hold on a second, like this guy's ranked here or whatever, don't read too much into that as of this point. You shouldn't anyways, because I think that the evaluations are way more important. I think that that's one thing I've been very impressed with this coaching staff with since their arrival is they've done a very good job of evaluating talent. I think we saw that last year in several different cases where Gavin Day, Rajon Duncan are two names that come to mind for me instantly as guys who, were ranked whatever when they originally got offered, and they finished the cycle ranked in the top 100 on different lists. So don't read too much into the rankings at this point in time. It's still obviously a nice moniker and something to talk about, and it's something that you can really grab onto, but that's not always the most important thing at the end of the day. And with that being said, I'm going to sound like a total hypocrite because two guys that I think could really get big bumps from this class are Ethan Coach and Maurice Williams. Let's start with Ethan Coach, 3-star linebacker. Him and his twin brother Justin are both committed to Washington. And I think that Ethan specifically right now is somebody where when you turn on the tape, I think his brother Justin is equally impressive in terms of athleticism and what he brings to the table. But in terms of what we've seen Ethan do on film, playing more of that true outside linebacker role, I think he can be a very disruptive pass rusher at close to 6'3", 205 pounds at this point in time. And I think he's somebody who, when I look at the modern Washington defense under Ryan Walters, he is somebody who fits so perfectly into the scheme. And I just look at what his fit could be at the next level, and I can't help but be super intrigued because this is a guy where you see that first step, you see that quickness, you see that patience and his eyes in the run game. I think all of that is very exciting to think about as Washington continues to just kind of scout that position and you see where it's going, because with 4 commits right now, we're not going to see another one at that position. But I think that as Washington continues to just go through these evaluations, we're going to see some of these guys get significant ratings bumps, because when you go in and you look at the film, it's, oh, okay, yeah, they're showing these traits. They're showing all these things that will help them succeed at the college level. And they're all things that pop, and in Ethan's case in particular, the things that pop in the Trinity League against the highest level of competition that you're going to find pretty much anywhere in the nation when playing high school football. So he's one guy I'm really excited about in that regard. And the other is Maurice Williams, the 3-star cornerback from Graham-Kapowsin High School here in Washington. And one of the reasons is When I was at the junior day festivities a couple of weeks ago, you see him walk in and it's, oh, that dude is not listed properly. He's listed at 6'1" and 180 pounds. And it's very clear that he's grown and is bigger and stronger than that at this point in time. And I think that's a really exciting thought when you think about what Ryan Walters and John Richardson want to do on the outside at cornerback. But then you go and you look at the film and you see the instincts, you see the eyes, you see the ball skills, the fluidity, the ability in press coverage, all of the different things that he brings to the table are all just truly enamoring traits for what you want in an outside cornerback at the college level. And I get excited when I say this because you look at what Washington has done in terms of on the recruiting trail over the last couple of years with those sorts of guys, with those traits. And you think about Rajon Duncan, Ramon Adams, Jaron Jones. I know he's a little bit different body type wise, but he shows those same, the ball skills, the aggressiveness in coverage, all those sorts of things that you're looking for. And I think Maurice Williams does all of those very, very well. And you look at the size of what you just lost in Takario Davis and Ephesians Prysock. Obviously, those guys are a little bit more rare at closer to 6'4", but Dylan Robinson, Emmanuel Carnley at 6'3". It looks like Maurice Williams could absolutely wind up at that same size by the time he gets to college at some point during his career. So those are all things that are really exciting to think about, because if we just continue to see Washington do what they've done at cornerback as long as John Richardson has been around, I don't care what his rating is. But again, I know I've said this before, you ever dares know this, to just kind of wrap up that part of this discussion. I think that the ratings can always be a really nice just kind of thing for these kids to hang on to and say, yeah, I worked really hard to get to this point, and I absolutely feel that I deserve that. So I think Maurice Williams and Ethan Coach are two guys who fit very, very well into that discussion. And when we look back on this class in December, and presumably most, if not all of these guys do wind up signing with Washington, that he's going to be one of those guys that, I remember Matt Doherty was saying this on this show in December about Zach Froh, and it's, wait, hold on, how did you get that guy? How did you, keep this guy under the radar sort of thing? And I think that Maurice Williams can absolutely be one of those guys, but I wanted to spend some time just talking about what could be next as well, because those are the things that I look at when I see the class where, yeah, the ranking might be a little inflated due to the number of prospects that Washington has committed. But at the same point in time, this is a really exciting group of prospects. When you go in and you watch the film and you see what these guys are doing, the athleticism, the movement skills, it's all just really fun to watch. I think the football IQ is one thing that really stands out to me in the evaluation of every single player that Washington has brought in so far. It's very clear that they understand the game at a high level, and that is one of the most important things that this player personnel department is looking for when watching this film. So that's one thing to keep an eye on. Another thing is I wanted to just kind of wrap this up a little bit with a bold prediction here. And it's something I was talking about with some of our insiders. You can check the link out to that down in the description below, by the way. You get a free 2-week trial, and after that, it's $4.99 a month. But one of the things that somebody was asking me was, well, what's next from here? Jon Ioane is a tremendous get at defensive tackle. He was the number one player on their board at that position. So the fact that Washington was able to go out there and seal that with a commitment is awesome. I look at what's next, and you need more, right? It's what we talk about every time we talk about defensive line on this show. You need to go out there and get more talent. And I got a bold prediction for you here. I think Washington is going to wind up with at least 2 more blue chip defensive linemen by the time this class signs in December. And I feel really good about where the Huskies stand with Tavita Nonu right now. I think Jason Kafusi has done a very, very good job of building that relationship. And especially with him being right down the road at O'Day High School, that's one of those guys that is so critical to this class. And especially, as you ever dares know, we talked about this on the bonus show, the way that his skill set and Jon Ioane's skill set can just kind of balance each other out in terms of how Jon Ioane can eat up blocks, and Tavita is very, very good at getting after the quarterback in some of these one-on-one scenarios. I think that they would complement each other very, very well at the college level, but I didn't want to talk about him so much because we've talked about him a lot. I wanted to talk about what else could be happening in this class. And I think that whoever this other defensive lineman is in this hypothetical scenario that I'm putting together here, I don't think that target has revealed itself. You can look at, I talked about this with our buddy Jacob Goins over on Lockdown Hoosiers on a crossover this week. I don't know if that'll be Aiden O'Neill. The Huskies certainly have a lot of ground to make up there. I know they're interested there, but I look at how this coaching staff has been trying to move further east and into the South into Texas for some of these defensive linemen. Obviously, we saw what happened with Zane Rowe and how that sort of fell apart in the last couple of days there. I look at just what Washington's been able to do there over the last couple of years, and you get Caleb Smith out of Alabama in the 2025 class. And I think that the Huskies know that in order to take that next step, they have to go in there and they have to find a way to pull out some of these high-end bodies. And whether that's, ponying up a little bit extra in NIL, which is, as always, a weird thing to say. But if that's the case, I think this coaching staff knows it and is willing to do that in order to make and just send the right sort of message, I should say. So as this kind of plays out over the next couple of weeks, next couple of months, one thing I've been just kind of kicking around and thinking about in my head is over the last couple of years now, we've seen some big surprises in terms of guys who maybe didn't wind up at Washington, but the Huskies did a very good job of getting in late on, where Brandon Harrington, the 5-star cornerback who wound up at Texas A&M, is a great example in the 26 class of all of a sudden the night before his official visit, it's, Brandon Harrington showed up at Washington. Whoa. I say that to say that don't be surprised if we see another one of those in the cycle, because Washington has done such a good job of developing these relationships and just developing that trust, something that Jon Ioane talked about in his commitment interview with so many of these top prospects from around the country. So just keep a really close eye on that, because I think this defensive line class and this 2027 class as a whole, obviously, is nowhere near complete. And with the way that Washington has been trending up on the recruiting trail, there's no reason to expect that they can't go out there and compete for some of the nation's top players, especially along the defensive line. But let's switch gears here a little bit, because I've seen these speculation, whatever you want to call it, about Tina Langley potentially leaving Washington for Alabama, and I don't buy it. And we'll get to that right after a message from our good friends over at Supply House, because this episode is sponsored by Supply House. You wouldn't show up on game day without a plan, and you wouldn't show up to a job without the right parts. That's why putting Supply House in your starting lineup is always the right call. Here are the stats. 300,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products, 500 tried and true brands, and 90% of the country is in the 1 to 2 day delivery zone. Need a last minute coupling, a compressor, a press tool? They've got it, and they'll get it to you quickly. They are clutch. If you're a pro in the trades, you can join the MVP of rewards programs and become a trade master. Pros get exclusive member-only pricing, priority shipping, industry-leading customer service, and it's all absolutely free. Visit supplyhouse.com/TM to learn more about becoming a trade master. Use promo code SH5College for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Promo code SH5College. Supply House, real people, real service. And we've got a message from our good friends over at Robinhood. What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house. It's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets changes the game. It's people moving the action. So when momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play by play, you decide. Trade every play with Robinhood, now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and cleared swaps trading involves significant risk and is not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives, LLC, a registered futures commission merchant and swap firm. So on the Twitter sphere for the last couple of days or so, I've seen a lot regarding Tina Langley and some concern that she might wind up at Alabama because it's closer to home, all that sort of stuff. I don't know if I'll buy that right now. And one of the biggest reasons is she absolutely deserves a contract extension and a raise after making back-to-back NCAA tournaments and what she's been able to do with this program. I'll talk about that in a second, but I want to talk about a couple of reasons I don't think this makes sense. The number one being the old Bama coach who left for South Florida on their own accord, by the way, was making less than Tina Langley is making right now at Washington. She's set to make $717,000 this upcoming season. And I think that Pat Chun recognizes what she's been doing and certainly should not hesitate to give her an extension, give her a raise, because she's done a tremendous job building this program through the transfer portal, through the ranks of high school recruiting, and winning an NCAA tournament game. They took one of the best players in the nation to overtime and also threatened the nation's longest home winning streak, regardless of men or women, at TCU in the second round of the NCAA tournament. I could not be more impressed with what Tina Langley is doing on the women's side of things. And I think that this is just one of those programs that when Pat Chun recognizes, you got to win all around, you got to do all these sorts of different things. Women's basketball is absolutely a program to invest very heavily in right now. And I think that when you look at what this team could be in 2026, this could be one of the 4 or 5 best teams in the Big Ten. When you've got Savia Sellers going into her senior season, coming off a all Big Ten first team campaign. Avery Howell looked like one of the best players in the conference, was an all Big Ten honorable mention. You got Bryn McGoy, former 5-star recruit who's on the all freshman team. I don't think that core right there, A, is something that Tina Langley would want to walk away from, but B, again, that's a team that could host a regional next year in the NCAA tournament. That's how talented the high end of this roster is. And then you look at what you got coming in a 4-star wing in Amaya Garcia, who looks like she could be a real player. And then you're still building on what was a top 10 class where Nina Kane is a promising prospect. Sienna Harvey, the Australian point guard, is somebody else who the Huskies are very high on and could certainly be a major piece of this rotation. So I look at all of those things and what Tina Langley has built so far at Washington. And I think that A, that's something she'd want to see through. But I think that in terms of the investment that Washington has put into the women's basketball program versus Alabama on salary alone, I feel like that's one of those things that you could certainly find an argument for her to want to go closer to home. But with where Washington's program is right now, I think that's something that she's going to want to be a part of. So keep a close eye on that. But let's move over to the men's side of things here for a couple minutes as well. We've got a lot of questions about, hey, what's this roster going to look like next season? Are we going to see a lot of turnover? Is it going to have to be built completely through the portal again? And I don't think so. One thing that I've heard from a couple of different people now, and Danny Sprinkle did confirm it in a press conference a while back, but didn't name names, is that several players on the roster did sign 2-year NIL deals. So curious to see who that might be. I've done some investigating, done some digging around, and haven't really been able to come up with too much at this point in time. But I want to throw a prediction out there at you as to who I think Washington is going to be able to build around going into next year, and then whatever else you might be able to do on top of that. But I look at this team right now, and I think you're going to have a really solid backcourt next year. I'm curious to see what happens with Jasir Rencher. Let me just talk about that right there off the top, because we don't know what is going on with the heart issue that he's been having, and if he's going to be able to play. Obviously, that's wonderful news, but sounds like there are still some things that Danny Sprinkle and the medical team and everybody want to see before they can really just kind of fully stamp that. So keep a close eye on all that, obviously hoping for nothing but the best for Jasir and his whole family as they continue to go through this process. But I look at the rest of this backcourt. JJ Mandequit is somebody who looked really solid, especially later on as he continued to develop. I think that he is somebody who could be a big-time anchor for the squad. Zoom Diallo, I think that he'll wind up being back because of how loyal he is to Washington, the greater Seattle area. I think that he is going to be one of the best players in the conference next season. Cortland Muldrew was somebody who really flashed down the stretch. I love what he brings to the table. That's a really solid backcourt right there. And then Wesley Yates on top of that core four. I think that that's a whole lot, but you still need more, especially in terms of the three-point shooting, but we'll talk about that in a second. And then I look at the front court. Hannah Steinbach, jury's out. I certainly am not betting on him returning at this point in time, where we saw him sign with XL Sports Management not too long ago. And I think that might be a very telling sign of where his draft status is at this point in time, because the rumors I've heard is that if he goes through this whole process and does wind up as, a kind of guaranteed lottery pick, that he'll be entering his name in the draft, or he'll just follow through the draft process, I should say. And if not, it sounds like there is a good chance he does wind up back at Washington. But I'm not betting on that at this point in time, after being the only player in the Big Ten to average a double-double last season. So keeping a close eye on that. But there is the possibility that Frank Kepnang gets another year of eligibility from what Danny Sprinkle has been saying. So that would obviously be a tremendous piece on defense to have back for another year, with especially how he was able to stay healthy for the majority of the season this year. I'm very interested to see what that might look like, because he's always been one of my favorite players to watch on this Husky team because of the energy and the passion that he brings, especially on the defensive end of the floor. Lathan Somerville, it's another name I'm curious about whether he might be back or not. I feel like he's somebody that this Husky team was obviously hoping for more from this season, but it's tough when you miss close to 6 weeks with a knee injury. So monitoring those guys. I think Madi Traore is a name that will wind up being back as well, where that's a guy this coaching staff was so excited about. And that was a really crushing injury that doesn't get talked about enough, in my opinion. That's probably partially my fault. But one of the biggest reasons, like, this coaching staff was over the moon about what he could do as an athlete and a floor stretcher, as a shooter. And obviously with that length at 7'2", he's just one of those guys that could absolutely change the game whenever he was on the floor. But that's something we have to wait another couple of months to see. I don't think that he'll be going anywhere after the injury and everything like that. So that would be a really solid core to build around. And then on top of that, it's about adding more length and athleticism and guys who can shoot the basketball. And one name that I wanted to highlight very quickly, partially because I think it'd be very funny to see this happen, is Oregon guard Jackson Shelstad. This is a guy who missed the majority of this past year with an injury, but that's somebody who could absolutely shoot the lights out, has done it at a high level in the Big Ten. And if Washington is looking for ways to go out and make an impact in the transfer portal, that would absolutely be a guy that I would target really quickly. And that's something that I want to keep monitoring as these next couple weeks sort of develop, because if Washington can find a way to get a couple of shooters, I think we can see them take that next step forward. In the Big Ten, we saw it. We saw what kind of heart this team plays with for Danny Sprinkle, especially in the Big Ten tournament, where you make that comeback against USC. You were on the verge of making that comeback against Wisconsin. Almost did the same thing against Oregon, where it doesn't count because it didn't happen, but it showed what kind of heart and passion this team is playing with and how Danny Sprinkle has helped inspire them. So I'm very curious to see what year 3 of the Sprinkle era will look like, because I think it could be, with the right pieces, of course, another step forward for this Husky basketball program that definitely needs it. But that's all I got for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. If you like what we have to offer here on Locked On Huskies, please make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure to click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please give us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll talk to you on Monday.